don't get bogged down by the technology side of things. Think about your audience. The technology is there to help you understand your audience, to help you how to do your website, to help you how to do your digital marketing channels in a way that your audience will understand, connect to, and ultimately it will result in revenue. Hi, I'm Emina Demiri-Watson, and this is SEO in 2026.
Emina, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
Well, first of all, the biggest one is don't get bogged down with all of the flashy terms. We've already started it. We're all talking about FanOuts, chunking, Cosine similarity. All of that is amazing. I love technology. But go back also to the basics of marketing, who your audience is. Those tools are brilliant as a way to help you understand your audience better, but they are not the goal in themselves. So be careful to understand the basics first.
We'll focus on the basics first here as well, and then we'll move on to understanding cosine, FanOut, chunking, whatever else you're talking about there as well. So in terms of the basics and in terms of defining who your audience are, what are the core ways that you go about doing that, and why is that important?
It's important because it all comes from knowing your audience. So I'm always reminded of my degree in development studies. I had a great professor that talked about 8 programs that are going into developing countries and failing. 8 programs specifically to get them to use sanitation. So basically building toilets. And they were failing, till somebody actually came up with total community sanitation, which is basically a program where you go into the community and you do social mapping with them to understand where the river is, where they go to the toilet, and all of that kind of thing. You facilitate a discussion. And only then that organization had a success rate that was really high of building toilets and these communities actually using it. And it's a great example with marketing and SEO and the rest of it. We kind of assume as marketers, we go top down. This is my audience. This is what I want to do. They're just going to swallow it, which it's not the case, really. You need to go and try and build the toilets the way that they want the toilets built rather than you telling them.
Okay, I'm trying to apply this toilets analogy to building a website. So can you help me out here in terms of actually how we bridge those two together?
Okay. So if you were building a website, if you were doing it how CLTS would do it, you would go and you would do user testing and user research and market research. So first of all, you would start with, understanding the company. Let's say you're an in-house person, you've been tasked to redevelop the website, you're a digital marketing manager. First, you have to absolutely understand what the business is from the inside. So customer service, sales, basically anybody who can give you like an insight of what they think the business does and how it does it. And then you go externally to your audience, understanding who that audience is, maybe even sitting. I remember 15 years ago, I sat in University of Sussex doing usability testing only based on Steve Krug's book. So I sat there with wireframes of my new website and tested it among students because I wanted to see, they were my target audience. I wanted to see how they, am I on track? So you can do it face to face. You can also do it really well with LLMs. And this is where Cosine, FanOut, all of that comes in. Because you think about, this is where my audience is. I have LLMs to help me crunch that data and understand it. You have APIs that you can bring it in really quickly into your local environment. And all of that is amazing, rich data about the audience. And then you go and build the toilets in the way that the audience wants it, rather than top down. You build your website the way that your audience wants it, in the way that they search and in the way that they understand.
Okay, your SEO, your website is a toilet. Nothing personal, but your website is a toilet.
No, but it always reminds me, it really always reminds me of this kind of like, this has been done for years and years and years, and it just wasn't working. And then somebody realized the reason why it wasn't working is because it's not starting with the community. And it's the same with marketing. You got to start with the audience.
So you mentioned CLTS. Do you mean cumulative layout shift there when you're referring to that? No?
No, that's a community-led total sanitation.
Okay, well, there we go. An acronym can mean absolutely anything. So the clarification was necessary and worthwhile.
There you go. I mean, we talk about geo.
So just before we talk about other terms that you've mentioned there as well, you say that audience research is the foundation of SEO in a zero-click AI search reality. So how do you actually measure the impact of what you're doing in terms of your audience research work? Because it's one thing to understand who your audience are, but if they're interacting with your content in a manner where they're not delivering any visits to your website, where's the value in the work that you're putting in there?
Okay, so this is this kind of marriage that absolutely has to happen between SEO in general digital channels and conversion rate optimization. Yes, you have less traffic, but the traffic that you have, you should aim to convert it. So in a situation where you have less traffic, the traffic that you get is even more precious because of the fact that you want them to convert. Because ultimately what we want is not traffic, it's conversions, it's revenue, it's not, empty visits to the websites. This is why I'm not like super paranoid about traffic going down, because a lot of our clients are not seeing the impact on conversions because partly we've been working with them on the CRO piece as well, not extensively, but at least we have helped them to think about those things. So what you need to do is rethink your KPIs. So your KPI isn't traffic, your KPI is revenue, it's conversions, and it's engagement metrics. This is the one that is really, really important. How to do it is making sure that your website uses things like Hotjar and other tracking software, making sure that you're looking at your user journeys, you have the analytics to support you in that. This is really, really important. So start from your measurement framework. In a situation where there's no traffic, what do you need to measure?
So once we've defined our audience, then we can start looking at the fancy jargon terms like Cosine similarity, FanOut, chunking. Can we focus on those terms now and give us an overview in terms of what they mean, please? Yeah.
I can try. I can try and explain them if you want, but try to be simple about it.
Go for it. Okay, let's start with cosine similarity then.
Cosine similarity, it's the one that everybody really knows. So it's basically a way of understanding context. Yeah. Let's say, for example, you have two documents. One of them is about Jaguar the cat, and one of them is about Jaguar the car. How does a search engine or an LLM, how do they understand which one you're talking about if you put into Google Jaguar? Yeah. Well, one of the ways of doing that is cosine similarity. I mean, I'm just simplifying here like massively. It's much more complicated than that, which is basically calculating the cosine angle between all of the kind of vectors within that corpus of that document. So if I see a sentence that goes, Jaguar was running through the woods and Jaguar, the spotty orange cat was running down the woods. I'm obviously talking about Jaguar. So it's about looking at, okay, it has Jaguar, but it has cat, but then it has spots. Sometimes it's not even that obvious. So Jaguar is spotty and has fur. There's no cat in there, but it will know because you have fur and you have spotty. So probably it's not a car. cars are not furry. Whereas on the other side, if you have a document that talks about mileage, engines, all of these kind of car-related terms, then it's obviously about a car. So it's a way of understanding the relationship between words, the semantic relationships between words in an embedding space.
So that's a summary of Cosine Similarity. What is FanOut and how do SEOs use FanOut?
Okay, so FanOut is a really interesting one because technically what this means, and it comes with AI mode, for example, although even with the AI overviews, you can kind of see it a bit. It's basically expecting what the next step, that's how I understand it, what the next step of the journey is. So in AI mode, for example, if you put in a query and you are looking for, best places to visit in Paris, yeah, it will give you the best places to visit in Paris, but it will also think about what the second kind of step of that journey is. So if I'm looking for best places in Paris, it might give me, like suggestions of restaurants as well in case that I want to eat somewhere. It's not going to maybe just focus on the Eiffel Tower. Yeah, it's going to expect what am I trying to build here? Am I trying to build an itinerary maybe? So it's kind of what is the next step in the journey from a query, which is a little bit kind of, we also talk about people also ask as one of the ways you could kind of see what the next steps are, because when you put in a query and you look at the questions that are connected and people also ask, usually they have a logical structure and you can see that there's a bit of a journey there. So if I'm looking at exploring best tools, maybe my next one is looking at pricing, what are some of the pricing of those tools and stuff like that.
So is it an SEO's job to put together the order of these queries to get the correct order of the fan out? Or is it possible to get AI or another bit of software to actually tell you the order that these phrases should be in?
I mean, the thing is that it's not about like the order of it. So one of the things that we have done with PAA, which is very prevalent still, is that we treat it literally as FAQs, whereas, it's not about creating a page that has this question, this question, this question. So, for example, what is e-learning authoring tool? What are the benefits of e-learning authoring tools? What are some of the e-learning authoring tools that I can buy? What are the, cons of authoring tools instead of, virtual learning environments, let's say. So it's not about having an article that basically does this, and just answers the question. It's about, for me, the way that I understand it is about the intent. Yeah. So the article can have not one single question in it. As long as it answers those questions in terms of intent, then you're sorted, basically, because it's not about the order. It's about, does it respond to the intent behind those queries? So don't get confused and just say, okay, right, I'm using Also Asked, for example. It's a great tool by Mark. And it gives you the PAA questions on several levels. And it's brilliant because it kind of gives you a journey of how people are searching based on your initial query. Well, what's the next step? But I'm not going to just take that query and just do an FAQ with them, because don't understand everything literally. Yeah.
So that's a lot about fanning out. You referenced Mark there. Mark also appears in SEO in 2026, so check out his content as well, of course. Let's get on to chunking. What is chunking and why is it important?
Oh, God. You see, the chunking is the most technical one, because chunking is actually something that has been taken from machine learning. It's not an SEO term. And that's the one that for me is like makes the least sense out of all of them when it comes to SEO, because the way that it's been understood is if you chunk your content, if you have a paragraph that responds to a query and does the intent, you need to chunk it out. So each one of your paragraphs is basically an answer to a question or an intent. Coming back to what I was talking about, FanOut, you can see how that could happen if you have an FAQ blog. Yeah, that's how it's been represented. But actually, it has nothing to do with that in machine learning. It has to do with, how many tokens they are. And the chunk can be this big or it can be this big. Yeah. It's not about the context and the understanding of that paragraph. It's something completely different. And to be fair, I know basics of chunking, and it's from the basics I can already see how actually that's not going to particularly help me with creating my content, because every model has a different chunking mechanism in them. Yeah. So how are you going to what are you going to do? Are you going to do one article for this model, the same article for this one, and just play around with it? It just doesn't fit in my head. I could be completely wrong though. So
we need to have a whole website discussion panel on chunking. Perhaps we can arrange that. Yes.
On chunking. Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it's one of those crazy ones. I mean, maybe I'm going to eat my hat. And it's actually, there's something that I'm missing there. But in my mind, I'm not sure why it's there.
Emina, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
The key takeaway is don't get bogged down by the technology side of things. Think about your audience. The technology is there to help you understand your audience, to help you how to do your website, to help you how to do your digital marketing channels in a way that your audience will understand, connect to, and ultimately it will result in revenue.
Emina Demiri-Watson is head of digital marketing at Vixen Digital. Find out more over at vixendigital.com. Emina, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thank you.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at SEOin2026.com.